Welcome, welcome, welcome to this edition of Sagionic 1027. We are so glad that you decided to join us today. And with us, we have another one of those guests that are like, yay!
Yay!
So, my guest today, before I officially introduce her, I would like to tell you a little bit about our program. Okay, so our program, Sagionic 1027, the word Sagionic means movement by movement in human time. The word Sagion, all by itself, means carriers of wisdom. So, our desire is to interview carriers of wisdom that perhaps in what they share, how they've walked out their created self in creativity, that you too would give yourself permission to do the same thing. I had the privilege of meeting Kim Smith in 2019 when I had the
hmm
honor of going to DC to DC Prayer Tent as one of the many representatives of Oregon. And it was there that I got to see glimpses of who she was created to be. I love the platform of Facebook. I love the freedom Facebook has given us to connect with one another. And I've got to watch her, and she is quite the explorer. So, Kim Smith, today's program is all about you, what's been placed within you, the wisdom insight that has taken you from strength to strength as you're carried throughout your journey on earth. And so I just want to welcome you to our program today and thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. This is a new adventure.
Uh huh. And you like adventures, don't you?
Oh, I love adventures. It's my favorite word.
Okay. So Kim, can you take viewers back on when to those around you it was discovered that Kim, she's a little adventurer. Can you take us back and just share with us how that became a love of yours and what does that look like?
Well, I remember I have a mother, and her nickname was Mother Nature when we would be out camping and hiking because she would just be thrilled at the creation around her and all the little things you could find, and she's quite expressive. And sometimes I get glimpses of her when I do that out in nature. You know how
Mm,
sometimes we emanate our mothers and our close relatives and what we do as we get older. And more recently, it's been the last 6, 7, 8 years since I've moved to Oregon, where I took it upon myself to discover hiking and the nature and the beauty of God's country around Oregon.
that's
There's
right.
lots of it, never
And,
ending.
and so, for viewers who don't know, I call her God's Adventure Girl because if you were to
Yeah.
see her on social media, she is forever out there capturing the beauty of creation. So, can you tell us what takes place internally, mentally, that has a physiological effect on you when you're in creation?
Mm. There's a couple different avenues. One is I've discovered like 3 or 4 years ago that I actually get withdrawals kind of when I'm not out in nature. It's just become a part of me. Going out hiking, I saunter. I am not a destination hiker, as well as an experience along the way, what you can find hiker.
Okay, okay.
So we go slow and take lots of pictures, look at all the little wildflowers, and there's something in that that just resets me. And
Ah,
I see God. And when I started learning about the prophetic, there would be a lot of things that I would look at that God would speak through to me through. And that's really awesome because I hear It's just a place where I really hear God at, is in the mountains too. And then this summer, it was a little bit different of adventure. I started some backpacking,
Okay.
you know, and so we did the part of the Rogue River Trail, the Mackenzie River Trail, and then a shorter one to end the summer into some mountain lakes. And I was pushing myself along the way because, you know, where you have life's inconveniences and you just need those extra umps to finish what you're doing sometimes. And it was kind of a personal challenge
Okay.
because I had never hiked, backpacked. We did 28 miles. The It was the Mackenzie River Trail, and it
Okay.
was a day a big fire blew up when we got out of there, the lookout fire.
Ah.
But it was just wonderful. It was challenging in a lot of different ways besides, you know, having a heavy backpack and walking a long way. But it's mentally challenging spiritually, and it just we were where was I was at, with my I was at church yesterday. I was with my daughter, and pastor was talking about how we're all used to conveniences in life, because we can get fast food or fast this and remote controls and all that. And I leaned over, I said, it's part of what I like about backpacking because you don't have those and it challenges you.
Mm.
And there's something about, kind of some of the ways before all those inconveniences were. When I was a kid, we didn't have all those inconveniences, microwaves weren't yet, the phones were on the wall, and that thing. And it it helps me keep me in my place a little bit, I think, too. Depending more on God and the ingenuity He gives me in the process, to figure things out. If there's a little issue along the way, then I get to use my thinking and my imagination to figure it out too. And I like that part of it.
That's good. So you mentioned a word, and perhaps maybe some of our viewers don't know what that word means. So could you break down the word prophetic? What does that mean, Kim?
Prophetic to me means tuning into God's voice and hearing what He's speaking, either for myself or for somebody else, or even a larger for a church or a nation, or, you can go on with it. But basically, it's tuning into God's voice and hearing what He's saying to you in the moment. It could be for in the moment, or it could be for a future time.
Okay, and so um,
That's a simple definition, I
yeah, very
think.
very simple. And I think in different movies over the years, or I actually, or maybe different things you've heard in talk shows or whatever, they have used a word called premonition.
Mm-hmm.
Like a knowing. There's a knowing of whether it be, this feeling in the pit of your stomach, right? Or I just don't have a good feeling about that, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned the Holy Spirit in what you shared. So can you share, who is you spoke of the Holy Spirit as if it was like a person. Can you break down
Well, He is.
who the Holy Spirit is
part
for
of
our
the part of
viewers?
the Trinity, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and I tune into Him a lot, because God answered a prayer and gave me a friend for hiking a lot, and we're similar and really enjoy each other a lot. But I also like to hike by myself, and people would be like, "Well, aren't you scared? Well, what if this happened? What if that happened?" And it's like, well, I just I check in with Holy Spirit, listen, and I do. I have a sense of knowing and can't explain it, but I carry it in me, and it's one way God speaks to me. And I have left situations or trails or turned around because it hasn't felt right, which it's kind of hard to explain, but God will protect us also. he'll make us aware of situations we shouldn't be in. And so that's a big part of when I'm in the woods too. And if he's not giving me any kind of alarms per se, then I just go enjoy myself and don't worry about it. And I can be just enter into peace and joy when I'm out there because I don't have those alarms going off because of resting in Him while I'm walking and discovering
That's really
and
good.
oohing and awing,
Yeah.
whatever else I do.
Yeah, because nature is so beautiful. I have this exercise that I do. Now, to some, this may sound morbid, but let me get to the end of it, okay?
Okay.
So, my husband has a motorcycle, and X amount of years ago, our children blessed us and they threw money down towards it, and he got a BMW motorcycle. Well, one day he was driving to work and he decided to stop and get a coffee. And then he was petting his motorcycle in his mind, saying how wonderful and great it was. Then he popped back on his motorcycle, and on the way to work, Bambi's mom jumped in front of him,
Okay.
and he got in an accident. And
Uh-oh.
the bike was no more, but he lived. Okay, and he lived and was barely affected by it. Okay, so moving forward, he got a new bike. And this is what I do. Here's the exercise I do. When it's my turn to be on the bike, I'm fully clothed. I have my helmet on. I've got my jacket on that has the back support in it. I've got gloves on my hands. I've got secure clothing on my legs, secure
Mm-hmm.
boots. But this is what I have to do. Okay, one of two things is going to happen. One, I'm going to make it home safely, or two, we're going to crash. Okay, if we crash, one of two things is going to happen. A, I'm going to wake up in a hospital. B, I'm going to wake up in heaven. Okay, Lord,
Yep.
now help me to relax and have fun.
I promised my kids I would never do anything stupid unintentionally, intentionally, or go off a trail. They're like, Mom, we want you to be safe. It's like I promise I won't take unnecessary risks,
Yeah,
because I have that too. But then, that's secondary into what I'm feeling, through the spirit too. So,
yeah.
because, but anyway, yeah, there's like if I'm either going to be in heaven or on the earth. So,
So, how would you encourage others to walk out? I like to call it a pure passion. And the reason I say pure is because we were created by a okay, so it says perfect wisdom that is from above is first pure, then peaceable, easy to be entreated, full of mercy and good fruits, without
mhm.
partiality and without hypocrisy. So I like to call it pure passions. Okay? So, how would you
Okay.
encourage others to walk out pure passions in life to whatever floats their boat?
I think one thing, a big part of that is healing.
Okay.
I've gone through a lot of healing in my life from hurts. And then, but also with that healing is becoming aware of just how much we're loved by God, and the identity that we have in Him. And when we realize who we are in Christ, it really can set a person free to be themselves. And then as you heal through your hurts, that also releases a freedom inside of you that, just can't be stopped. So, it
Right.
is just walking in who He creates us to be and finding that out. And it's a journey, and I'm loving the journey. It's an adventure. I call it my God adventure. So, God's Adventure Girl is a good name for me.
Yes. See, and I didn't know that that's what you call it, right? And so,
Yeah.
so share with us some examples of how, in you being yourself, the fullness of yourself, how you've encouraged others to step out and walk out their pure passion.
So I'm trying to think. One is my daughter. I think because of a lot of the hurt I went through, and my children are grown. They're from 28 to 40. I've got 6 of them, and they have watched me. And I think um, first we need to take care of ourselves because we're an example to all those around us what we go through. And we may be in a hard spot, but as we let the Lord work in our lives and heal us and grow us, it is just we're a light to everybody, an example that there's better. God grows us, and where we are, we don't stay, but we keep moving on to who we're called to be. And I've seen that in some of my children, and because one of them has walked through some hard time, and then she's allowing God to heal her and mold her into who she is. And she's just leaps and bounds. And it's like my ceiling is their floor.
That's
And so,
right.
as far as I go, they can go that much further. And there's one thing I want my kids to know the depth and the width and the breadth and the height of God's love for them. And so, by learning to walk in that myself, that releases it for them to walk through too. And so that, and another big passion that I've come across in recent years is I picked up worship flagging quite totally by chance. And there's some others who are um, picking up flags and releasing their worship through that way too. And that's really been beautiful to watch them bloom and to be able to express more freely what they're feeling and their worship toward our God.
That's amazing. I want to go back to what you said. My ceiling is their floor. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a book. Okay.
Yeah.
Allowing others to step on your head, right?
Hmm.
You could add comedy in there, right? Allowing others to
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
my ceiling is their floor, allowing others to step on you or enabling others to step on you, right? We don't need to see it as a bad thing, right? Because
No, no.
to
Uh-uh.
yeah, to think that our children are not going to go through rough situations, it's we're fooling ourselves, right? To
Yeah.
having gone from a time where one kid got a trophy to now every kid gets a trophy, it almost makes it seem like everybody's a winner, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's going, oh, I want to change the verbiage. Everybody's going to achieve the same. I want to change it to that. Everybody's going to achieve the
Yeah.
same at the same level, at the same timing. But that's not reality, right? Because some
Oh.
may, if you have 6 kids, you probably have grandkids by now. I have 6 kids, I have grandkids by now, right? And if I watch all the grandkids how they work, how they articulate with one another, it's just fascinating to watch them, right? Um,
Yeah.
you've got one that's just really slow and she's happy to just play by herself. You've got one that, okay, let's clean up, and she'll clean up 90% of the work. Well, the 90% of the work is going to hinder the one who are watching her do 90% of the work, right? So trying to
Yeah.
create that balance amongst them. Um, and I think that as it's important as adults to go back and see not how do we tell them what to do, because Lord knows we all went through that phase as parents, right? And then it's like, wait a minute, pull yourself back, start to watch them, start to observe, trust them, and then
Yeah.
speak into their lives. Okay?
Yeah.
So, can you share, as God's girl, God's adventure girl, right? Can you share with viewers, without going too personally in depth, one of those lessons you learned in stepping back in a situation?
Like we can't tell our children what to do because they are responsible for their own decisions, and we all learn by mistakes. And sometimes we can see them maybe not quite well. There's more than one way to do everything, right? I mean, there's not one way to do anything. Um, so it's allowing them how to figure out how it works for them to do it. Um, because you're not going to do the same thing the same way I am,
Mm-hmm.
right? And if I have you do it the same way I am, then you're not going to learn what you need to learn through how you're going to figure it out. Does that all make sense? And
Absolutely.
so it's releasing what we think they should do. And this is for anybody, whether you're in a leader in a group at church, little ministry leader, or as a mother with children, or the boss at work, or wherever. People have to be allowed to work things out, within parameters and boundaries, of course, but let them figure out how to do it themselves, because they're going to pick up a lot more self-worth and ingenuity and, the self-gratification, which is lacking a lot of times these days because people aren't allowed to do things and figure it out and achieve on their own, and how they can do that anyway. Does that
Uh-huh.
make sense?
Absolutely, it does. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because let's think of this for a second. When you're in your, so to speak, wheelhouse, right?
Hmm.
I remember hearing years ago that if you were walking out what you were created to do, that's when you're the most happiest, right?
Yeah.
And how you say, if I go through withdrawals, if I'm not out in nature, right?
Yeah.
And, or whereas like somebody like me, um, although it may appear to be I'm an extrovert, I'm an introvert because I need a lot of time alone.
Yeah.
So once I have that time alone, quietness, even in the midst of all my, having my kids growing up, I had to get up really early, or I was awakened very early, so I could have that alone time, just that alone space. And so understanding yourself, healing yourself is vital, right?
It's
So
vital.
so that you can walk out to be the fullness of who you were created to be. Because when you're the fullness of your version, or pardon me, when you're the fullness of who it is you've been created to be, you're actually inspiring others to do the same.
Well, we're giving God our worship. And to me, that's worshiping God. Um, walking that out. As part of our worship to Him and honoring Him, because who created us? you know. So
Uh-huh.
that's a huge thing, and He created us each individually to shine in a different way. And so altogether, just think each one of us reflects a facet of who God is. And if I'm not discovering that and allowing people to see the journey, then I'm really holding back part of God from the world. So he shines through me. I know that. I get these little comments a lot, and it's wonderful, but where I am today is not where I'll be next year either, because I'll be growing and allowing him to shine more. And growing is making mistakes is part of growing. Okay, so don't be afraid to do something wrong or off, but own it and then go through it.
That's right. That's
Because it's
right.
all a process. Yeah.
At the level or the knowledge that you have, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes, like, if somebody played Let's Play Crafts, I'm gonna be like, I can't do crafts, right? For the speakers, they've got to sign a speaker agreement, and that's the extent of my craft. If you saw that picture, okay, you would think a little kid
Hmm.
drew that. No, that was very creative for me. Okay, Now this masterpiece behind me was done by by my only biological brother. Okay, he's the one who
Okay.
did this masterpiece behind me, and I consider it a great honor to have it in my home. It's actually larger than a door frame. It is
Oh,
a
wow. Yeah.
it's a masterpiece, and it's just. But that was not my forte. I was the let's build a fort, and once you built the fort and completed that, you built another fort, right? So
Mhm.
in this space, okay, what are we going to do now? What are we going to do now? In that just happy creative space. Now, what about um, how would you encourage those through creation who do not know a creator or have been given a horrific misrepresentation of the creator?
I've had some horrific misrepresentations of him. And, but in my heart, I knew it wasn't how he was and was able to release it. Um, I think a lot of it has to do with I'm going to say walking through healing, because if God's been horribly misrepresented to you because he is love, and so that means you weren't loved well in some way by someone. So it's, again, getting to know who love is. And so I reflect that back on, and so when you forgive somebody, sometimes it's so deep and so horrendous, you have to pray to forgive them, right? To go back to that. And so if it's somebody who doesn't know God that's been really hurt, um, if they're listening to this, I would assume they have somebody in their life who is a representation of who God is, or somehow they found out this, so they have an idea, okay? And so it's asking God, I don't know who you are. I don't believe, whatever, but show me who you are. And I think God's really faithful, especially when people are hurting a lot, and he will show them who he is. And it could be through others, or it could just be through, analysis might be a buzzword, through some kind of encounter with him that doesn't involve another person, because God will speak to that person. And I have found him, I say this a lot in the group that I lead, he's the most gentle man ever. Because as you're walking through and releasing whatever that misrepresentation was of God, he meets you in that journey. And that's as you release the hurt and the misconceptions, then he can really fill you with his love.
That is so beautiful. And I saw, hold on, I got to get something because I need a visual. I
And
saw a
that's
bit.
when I can get all choked up and spread tears.
Yep, I saw a visual for you. Okay, so Kim touched on the word prophetic earlier. Okay, and sometimes people hear words, sometimes people see things. I happen to see
Mm-hmm.
things. Okay, so when she was speaking, I saw Kim holding one of those things that we think are fun as a kid, but if we were adults and realized what they were and what they do to the neighbor's yard, we wouldn't do it. And that is the wish thing, right? The dandelions, right?
Oh,
So that when you're
dandelions.
below those, you're putting those seeds everywhere in the neighbor's yards, but we're not told
Oh,
that as
you can put
kids.
them in my yard. I'll take her dandelions. I ate my first dandelion this summer. They're edible. And they're not bad. And I made dandelion patties and some tinctures. There's a lot of wonderful healing
I
properties
know
about
there is
dandelion.
even in the roots too. The roots in the roots.
Yeah.
There's healing in there
Yep.
too.
Tea. Uh-huh.
But it's what I want you to do is I
Yeah.
want you to take one of those little things, and I want you to blow the love like butterfly kisses. This little dandelion,
Ah,
this, and I didn't see the butterfly kisses until I began to speak. Okay, so I want you to blow it so that it's almost as if butterfly kisses were being released into the earth's atmosphere, and people could just feel the sweetest, softest touches, almost like the softness of a rose petal. When you're a little kid, you take a rose petal and you
mhm.
could put it on your lips, especially on your lips. It feels the best, just so they could feel that soft flutter of love coming from the Lord. And I want you to pray
I
over the
have some
people.
yarrow I picked on a hike. Get a stand in for a dandelion.
Okay, let's do it. Let's do it. Go ahead. We're gonna activate. Powers in heaven, activate.
There you go.
You know,
Activated.
that's right. Because uh, whether or not you had a good representation given you in life, or a bad representation given to you in life, whether you had good or bad parents, whether you had no parents, whether you had your own room, a bed, clean clothes, a civilized meal. I'm sorry for any of the ill ways in which life was delivered to you. But can you talk to the people about what's been depicted about creation?
What's been depicted about creation?
Or written or scribed about creation? As in, who told the waves they could only go so far?
Well, that's God put all that into place. The boundaries, the sun, the moon, the stars, the waves, the seasons, the color changes, the growing, God placed all that in order. And we're stewards of that order. He does it, but we're stewards of the earth he gave us. And I think the woods get as much pleasure from us being in them, enjoying them, as we do from them. That might sound a little wonky, but we're all living creatures, and I don't mean this in some weird thing, but the trees, they grow and they breathe, and um, it's they don't have spirits or anything like that. That kind of wonky stuff. But I somehow I think they can feel the joy from us being there. I don't know if that's scriptural. I have no clue on that, but sometimes I'm just so led to go up and touch old trees. And I can't say why, but I find, like your husband pet his motorcycle, I just find myself going and touching things and feeling them. And it's like I can feel God through his creation. It's, not the tree, it's God through the tree, but there's something there. And, it has me thinking, oh my gosh, what has this tree seen in its lifetime? And all those kinds of things I can go off and imagine. Not that the tree has any power, but yet there's been a lot around it. And it's like, so God, in this point in time, what do you have what do you have here for me to see? Because God will, speak to us. And one time this summer, I was on a trail and I had never experienced this before, but all of a sudden I just felt like I was walking on holy ground. And, I was walking with my friend. I says, I'm just so overcome right now. And I just started to cry. And I had never experienced that before, but there was something in that moment. Was the Dorner Fir Trail here in Douglas County. And it's old growth. I don't know, but, so God's in and through his creation. So I don't mean to get weird, like, like trees
Nope,
have,
nope, nope.
because that's going there. But I mean, I feel God through his creation. I mean, he's the creator of it all, and he speaks, and we're his creation, and he speaks through his creation. And so sometimes I just stop and I touch, I smell, I breathe, I relax, I take in deep breaths and just relax. And there's something in all of that. And that's what resets me. It's kind of like some people do at the beach,
That's right.
wherever.
Yeah.
And so we all have that feeling some places. And I think God's designed us. Well, he definitely designed us to enjoy his creation. I mean, there's no doubt about that. He created, and what did he say after everything?
It is
And it was good.
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 Yeah.
Good. Not just, oh, it's good,
Yeah.
but it's good. And so I think we can all benefit by being in his creation more, in
Absolutely.
front of the TV for less, and and all those different things too, because there's a lot to be discovered out there. And I think part of what's to be discovered out in creation is yourself.
Uh-huh. I'm reminded of something, and that is within the last couple of months, there was a day where, with my grandkids, I was watching the Discovery Channel,
Mm-hmm.
and or had on Planet Earth or one of those things, right? And because I wasn't raised, okay, I like to say it this way: the Lord has always known every single created human being.
Mm-hmm.
He's always known us, right?
Yeah.
But we have not always consciously known him. So I
Right.
often ask the question, when did you consciously become aware of the love of the Lord? Okay. So because I was not raised in an environment to know I was loved by a creator, when I came to know him in 1984, October the 6th, 1984, I wanted only to learn and know about what the Bible had to say. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so then when I would watch things like the Discovery Channel, it hurt my heart that they referred to nature as Mother Nature or whatever it was. But
Yeah.
a couple of months back, I was watching the Discovery Channel, and I received a word from the Lord that was filled with life. And I was rebuked by the Lord. And it was the most beautiful thing that he could do for me, because in times past, when I watched these programs, I mentally judged the narrator.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And the Lord rebuked me in such a manner that was so beautiful, because he said, Sean, those are my created humans that have been given a desire to love nature. And if they did not walk out their created purpose, you would not be able to view it on the Discovery Channel or Planet Earth.
Right. True. Yeah.
And I repented. The Bible talks about being in sackcloth and ashes, right? I repented. I said, oh, Father, I am so sorry. I am so sorry that I judged people who have been given that, wow, right? And can you imagine when, before drones, right? Before drones, what it was like, and then
No.
after drones, right? To to, I got to see that there's this salt lick in wilderness, right? There's a salt lick in nature that draws all of these animals to this salt lick, right? An actual salt lick. And so
Yeah.
predators knew at a certain time, right? So everybody had to balance when they were going to the salt lick, or they were going to become part of the hors d'oeuvre with the salt lick, right?
Yeah.
Part
Yeah.
of the
Right.
meal or
Uh-huh.
the snack with the salt lick. And um, so then it makes me think of all of those who have been misunderstood in the midst of, gosh, caring for the planet,
Yeah.
right? Those people who have a passion to recycle, right? Those people who have a passion to save the forest, right? Those people who have a passion to save the elephants, have better environments for dogs, right? Truth be told, I can't watch those commercials because I've never even touched the blood of any of my children because I'll pass out, right? I can't see traumatic things. It's too much for me, right? It's just like, oh, one time I had an employee who cut her finger, and I'm like, oh my gosh, you just need to cover that up. And I had to take her to the fire department for them to look at her finger to tell me so I knew if I needed to take her to the emergency room.
Uh-huh.
I couldn't do it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to drive, right? And
Yeah.
so, um, hmm,
We're all just built a little differently.
that's right.
And that's where I think each one of us is a facet of who God is. Each person he created. Just like we all have our things we don't like blood or whatever. No. And maybe that's something you need to overcome, but maybe, that's part of whatever too. But it doesn't make it, excuses for us, like, oh, I can't do that big, whatever. But it's I find that God releases things over time in my life, like new identity and strengths, and so it's a continual process of coming to find out who we are in Christ. And as we do that, then our facets just shine all the brighter.
That's right.
Who he is.
I interviewed somebody, and she was sharing how uh, she is currently in this life situation a relatively recent widow. Okay. And when she was sharing about her ed, I'd never heard it. I'd never heard anybody spoken of it to this degree. She goes, "Yeah, my ed was with us, and he went from life to life." And I was like,
Mm-hmm.
"Wow!" Right? And
Mm-hmm.
that did not take away the factor that she has moments of crying every day, right? Um, and so, can you share with viewers um, an experience where you walk through something difficult, but you took, I'm going to call it a soothing mechanism that specifically um, encourages you um, with no strings attached?
A soothing mechanism. Soothing mechanism.
Yeah, soothing mechanism. Okay, because it could be creation, it could be time with people, it could be, you read a book, it could be you read a passage, it could be a song came on the radio. So,
Okay. Yeah. So I had a son who passed away 3 years ago in May of 2020. And so different times. I mean, sometimes it's the day his birthday I grieve. Other times it's the day and he was found unconscious. Sometimes it's that day. Sometimes it's the day he passed. But different times will bring up like this heavy grief. Just like you have to and you process it. You can't just be the, you have to go through the grief. And so one year I went to a waterfall that we went to together and just spent some time talking with God there, and another time I will be with family, and so he gives me different things to do when I feel that grief. Other times it's worship. I will go to worship and deep grief. And that is, because that pleases God too when we're not feeling good and we go to worship. And there's something in our grief and our hard times that when we go to do worship, it impacts it heavily in the best way. And it's not like we don't miss him anymore, but that the grief is relieved and we can remember him with, joy and, in a different way without that heaviness, with more of a joy, lightheartedness.
Because reality is, honestly, reality is death sucks.
It sucks bad. And, he's with the Lord and he had a lot of trauma as a young child and ended up with addictions and different things and was in and out of recovery and all this stuff. But when it comes down to it, and I talked with a friend who's also a pastor at a church who is close with Paul. And, there's no doubt Paul loved the Lord. He's in heaven. And where mental health, abuse, trauma, addiction, where all that gets so jumbled up, it's hard to really separate it all. But I know when it came down to it, Paul really did love the Lord. And I have no doubt he's with him in heaven. And with that, you can't go to shoulda, woulda, coulda, because that goes nowhere fast. It is what it is. With everything, the past is the past. And, we look forward to our future with Christ, and he got there earlier than mom. And that makes it really hard some days. But, most all the time, because we miss him, we love him. You hear that saying, you grieve because you loved. And as deep as you grieve is as deep as you love. You can't separate them. And so months will go by sometimes, several months before I have a grief. And then other times it's like a couple of weeks in a row and it makes no sense. And so when I feel grief, I feel it. Does that make it a double feel? So when I sense grief, I feel it and move through it because that's what God's told me I need to do in my healing. And is feel the emotions that go with it, because emotions aren't right or wrong. They just are. So it's like, well, why am I feeling anger? Why am I feeling frustration? Why am I feeling this? And work it out with God and then move on. That's right. And release it to him. And worship is a huge thing with me. And then just resting in the fact that, Paul is with the Lord. And, God, everybody has hurt in life because of who's ruling on earth at this time. Satan rules and he's trying to create as much havoc on, while he's here as he can. But in and through that, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, in God, hear this flipped around a lot, that God works all things, for the good. But I've seen in my life that, there's a lot of things you think whatever good could come of this. And then, and it may not be right away. It may be years down the road, but there is good that comes from it. And I've learned that my timing isn't necessarily God's timing, and there's a lot of those facets. So, that's where living in the moment is really good. Oh, we can't do anything about the past except to release what we need to release from that and move on to the future. And there is planning for the future because he tells us to be wise, and there's different planning for the future that needs to be done, but we don't live in the future. We have to live today. And I think that also releases a lot of joy and peace in my life, living for today, and it frees me to enjoy today without the encumbrances of the past or the questions of the future, because none of us know what that's going to hold. We do our best to plan and to go for it, but really today, I couldn't win the lottery because I don't buy tickets, but well, that's an example. So I could go win a lottery ticket when I left
Yeah.
here. I thought, oh, okay, I'll buy a lottery ticket. Or I could go
Yeah.
in and get in a car accident and, you know, have injuries severe or be dead. We can't, we do our best to make our plans. So when we do, we just have to just live for today.
That's
What is
right.
it? That kind of a thing. Otherwise, we get too bogged down with either the shoulda, woulda, coulda's, or maybe false hope or anxiety because of whatever the future, could be. And just live,
That's
enjoy
right.
today. If you have a tragedy, go through the tragedy. If you're in a really good spot, enjoy it. you know it's good. It's good.
As wild as that seems, in my family, I'm Greek. Um, and so picture big fat Greek wedding and then
Hmm.
multiply that by 100. That's my family. Okay. And so when my dad was passing, oh, here's my family. Here's my family photo. This is my childhood family photo.
Oh, fun. Yeah.
So you pulled it up. That's
Nice.
my parents. And
Uh-huh.
uh, so when my dad in 2000, uh, he was definitely getting ready to go to heaven, and he was in the hospital. We it was through humor, through humor. We coped through humor,
Yeah.
and it is humor is medicine to the soul. It truly is. Laughter, it says, is medicine to the soul.
Hmm.
And I think we all have different coping mechanisms. And just like you said, there's not one way to do, there's not one right way to do something, right?
Yeah,
Um,
there is yeah.
so like for me, when my kids were growing up, let's say, okay, they had their daily chores and they had their once a week chore. Well, one of those once a week chores was their bathroom. And so I would have one son who could clean it in 20 minutes. And then one son took an hour and a half, right? And you're like, okay, but the end result had to be the same because
Yeah.
I knew. So there are many things in life that are subject to scrutiny, but then there's other things where there's more lenience. But
Right.
I knew one day they were going to grow up and have a boss. And the boss was going to
Hmm.
demand that things are done to this level. Okay? And one may choose this and one, but here was the end result. And so if we think of, I think of the beauty of creation. I think of the beauty of the creator. Okay? And if we look at the freedom of creation, I have one, two, three, four, five, six. I have six different trees that surround me. I have bamboo that's confined to 7 pots or 6 pots because I want, six safe pots, you know.
Yeah.
But those little pots started from a cottage cheese size container, and now they are six ginormous barrels, right?
Okay.
Um,
Yeah.
if I just look at creation that is in such order, there's order to it. I don't have to
Mm-hmm.
go out there and talk to my leaves and say, okay, guys, it's fall. It's time for you to start to change colors,
Time to turn orange.
right? I
Yeah.
don't need to do that. And so if we think of creation, if we think of a creator who created creation, his orderliness is not sabotage because creation itself shouts out that there's a creator.
Mm-hmm.
So, can you share with viewers the freedom that you have had in life? Um, I want you to share two things. The
Okay.
hindrances that were in your world before you were consciously aware that the Lord loved you. And then the freedom that came after you begin to walk in His order in life.
Okay. So that brings me to I reached a point. It was in 2008. I had a big aha moment. I call my 9.5 earthquake. And I share this in a group that I facilitated a lot. I looked back so I could move forward. And when I looked back, I saw I had a dad who was really sick in a nursing home. It wasn't around. I had an abusive stepfather. I would, and I had a very loving mother, but I would hear things like, you really don't feel that way, and then I had a real bad speech impediment as a child. And so I had all these things that uh, my voice wasn't heard, and I didn't have my voice. And so I ended up in some marriages that weren't by God's design. They were more under the guise of power and control. I was in one for 18 years and then another for 7. And I was at my job. I had got a job in a relief nursery working with people at risk for abuse and neglect. And I was sitting in this training that day, and it was a 9.5 earthquake in my life because it was very life altering. And God clearly showed me, because when I left the 18-year marriage and I left it, I was told by my church that, I God wouldn't bless me anymore, and a lot of this spiritual things. It wasn't nice, and I knew I had done everything physically possible, and I felt released to leave. So that's one time that I knew that God. I knew I was responsible before God for my decision. They weren't responsible for my decision. But then I went ahead and met somebody else, and same horse, different color. And as I'm sitting in this training listening, and we had been to counseling and both the end of both marriages and all, but it was like this light was turned off, and it was like, oh my gosh, that's it. I have been living in abuse. And I had no clue because I was never hit. But starting the healing, there was a program, a faith-based abuse program that somebody led me to, and there was, and that's a conference, a 3-day kind of a healing conference at a church called Life Changes, and there was several significant points which started after I knew, and so back up when I left that 18-year marriage, and I was given all these said not nice things by my church family I'd been with a long time. And it's like, I knew better. I knew God was good. I knew I had done all I could, and I felt released. So it's like God, and then he started blessing me with different things that were obvious blessings within the first year after that. And it's like, God, I know this isn't what they say, but I know one day I'll understand why the opposite is happening, because, you know, and it was at that moment that I knew that that was the answer back then, that it was God's child was not being treated nicely in a lot of different ways and not being honored. And I don't think he likes that either. He loves marriages, but this is not normal marital conflict. Okay. This is about a power and control where one person, you know, wants to dominate over the other one. And that can be in a whole host of ways. And it doesn't have to include physical abuse by any means. But once I started that healing journey, and I say looking back, not to put blame on anybody or any one thing, but to understand how I got there. Because my reaction was, how did I get here and how can I never go back? And so that's when I started. He just walked me, and all I can say is he walked me through it. One was that, and it's the program that I facilitate now, and I in turn get to release my healing into other women. And the understanding of what abuse was, that I had no clue what that was until that point. And I even, you know, just never had heard all that. So, but it's been, that was in 2008, and this is 2023. And so I rarely get any big things that come to me like, oh, I need to let go of this, or this still needs to be healed. But it was a process, I would say about 11-year process in letting go of the past and the hurt. But more than that is discovering who I was in God. And that's what the program facilitates, is who are you? How did God create you? And how you, we're his child, and he loves us, and he doesn't want us in a situation where we're not being honored either. And like I say, this is not normal marital conflict at all. That's a whole nother story. But in finding out who I was and who God was, and, you know, not so tears earlier, I found him to be so gentle, because the things that I needed corrected in my life, they were convicting, but they were not condemning ever in any way, shape, or form. And he would speak to me when I was ready to be heard about different things. And then when he would bring up things that weren't, that need to be released because they need to be healed or whatever, then we would just go through that process together. And so it was a long process. And at first, there was overwhelming tears and overwhelming grief and deep guttural crying. You know, it was very, very much deep in me. And as more the 18-year marriage than the 8-year marriage, but some there. But as I walk through releasing it all, he's just replaced it all with a knowledge more of who I am and being more comfortable with I am, with joy and peace and all that jazz, all that good stuff. Joy, peace, patience, kindness, love, goodness, gentleness. And he just keeps growing me. And for a few years, I'd asked him, I had led a group before I moved to Portland. I was up in Portland for a few years and thought I was healed. And then I realized how healed I wasn't as I went through a couple of these other conferences where it got deeper and more. And then you realize in God, if you let go of all the hurts in your life at once, I think we go mentally crazy because he couldn't handle it all, but he knows when to heal this spot and when to heal that spot, and when to convict you of maybe this wrong concept, and when to love you and into all those things while, life is going on. Single mom with 6 kids and all that. And it's been quite a journey, but I feel very honored to have gone through it with him. And I feel very honored to be able to release that healing that I've got to walk through with him into others' lives.
That's
So,
right. Because who knows you better than him?
mm-hmm.
Nobody knows you better than he does. And that's my favorite thing about the Lord. He is my best friend in the planet, right? He's
Yeah,
my,
he's a very good guy.
he's, because nobody knows me. Nobody gets me. Nobody understands me like he does. And
Yeah,
when I wake up in the morning, he's the first person I talk to. When I go to sleep at night, he's the first person I talk to. I remember my husband saying to me once, "You never say amen." I was like, "Well, because the conversation never stops." The conversation just keeps going on and on. And so thank you so much for your vulnerability.
mm-hmm.
um, Thank you for your willingness to just be transparent with people today. And I even think of your birds singing in the background, the
Yes,
joy. No, the
I like my
joy.
parakeet.
Yeah, the joy that created bird brings to people, just the sound of it, you know. And so I'm so honored that you came on today, Kim. And I'm just looking forward
Thank
to
you.
more of life unfolding. What is it going to look like? Because I think of silly things like back in the day, there was a movie called Super Dave Osborne, right? I just hysterically laughed with Super Dave Osborne, right? So, what is it going to be? Is it going to be books? God's Adventurous Girl Kim? Is she going to have a program? Is she going to have these hikes, right? What's going to go on?
Yep.
But I know a lot's going to go on because you will walk out the promise. Kim will be carried from strength to strength until she sees the King in Zion. And the beauty of, I like to call all the promises in the Bible irrevocable. And the beauty of
Mm-hmm.
he who has begun a good work in you will complete it until the day of our Lord Jesus Christ.
Yes, he will.
So thank you for coming on this our program today. And I want to
Mm-hmm.
say to all of our viewers, until our next episode of Sagionic 1027, may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon thee always. Blessings. Bye.
Bye bye.